If you're looking for something to challenge you and help you grow, get married. Walida Cherie. When you walk down the aisle, you may have experienced several conversations in your head like, I'm finally getting married to my best friend, or OMG, I have no idea how to be a great spouse, or I forgot to book the honeymoon. Whatever thoughts ran through your mind, I think it's safe to say that divorce wasn't one of them. In Western countries such as the United States, our schools fail to teach us about marriage. In most churches, the conversations regarding marriage is mostly on things the wife should do, but there are very few conversations about how the husband should be accountable in the marriage as well. And at home, when only 45% of the adult population is married, it's safe to say that most people lack the experience of seeing a healthy marriage modeled. So how are we expected to have a successful marriage with nothing to guide us? Since I've been married, I've been on a journey to learn from other successes and failures that could benefit my marriage. I would never suggest applying everything one couple does in their marriage and applying it to yours because each relationship is different. My mom got married more than a decade earlier than I did at the age that I got married, so her experiences are much different than mine. With that said, here are 5 books on marriage every couple should read. Hey everybody! Welcome to the Build Young, Grow Wealthy podcast. My name is Walida Cherie, and I help millennials manage, protect, and grow their income to obtain financial freedom. In today's podcast episode, I will share 5 books on marriage every couple should read. If you want to know every time I upload, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review of this episode. Without further ado, let's get into this. Number 1. The 5 Love Languages. This book will always make my list of recommendations because it not only showed me how to better love my husband, but it also helped my husband to better love me. In this book written by Gary Chapman, he breaks down the 5 ways that he believes represents how all humans need or show love. He calls them the 5 love languages. And here's a quick summary. Acts of service. If you like when someone offers you a helping hand when doing chores around the home, helping out with the kids, or remembering to put gas in the car before the light comes on, this is your way of feeling loved. These tasks, which may seem so simple to some, will make a huge difference in your relationship if one of you has this as your love language. The next love language is words of affirmation. For many people, saying I love you or saying kind words seem to be just the way we communicate. But for a person whose love language is words of affirmation, they feel loved when they hear consistent, positive, and encouraging words. The next love language is receiving gifts. I'm not talking about gold diggers here, although they like to receive gifts too. But your spouse is different because the price of the gift doesn't matter as much as the thought that was put into giving the gift. Next is physical touch. Hear me out, ladies. This is not all men's primary love language, although it's hard to believe. Physical touch goes beyond sex. Do you frequently enjoy holding hands, cuddling, or hugging? If the answer is yes, it's safe to say this is your love language. And lastly, quality time. There is a difference between spending time with each other and spending quality time with each other. Spending time with each other can mean that you're both sitting in the same room scrolling on your phone, versus spending quality time with each other, which is giving each other your undivided attention. If you and your spouse are in a season of your life where you both feel like you don't understand each other, then I highly recommend reading the 5 love languages and also taking the quiz to find out your primary love language. I'll leave the link in the description box. Number 2. How to Be Married by Jo Piazza. This book is for the ladies, but not every woman will agree with everything mentioned in this book. I didn't, but there were some things that I found valuable, which is why I'm recommending that you should at least read it for yourself. Jo Piazza was a then 34-year-old woman who got engaged 3 months after meeting the man of her dreams, and was soon diagnosed with muscular dystrophy, which assisted in the decision for her to be married. Jo is a travel editor that travels the world. She decided that she and her husband would travel to 20 countries on 5 continents to figure out what modern marriage means in a world that no longer values marriage, and also how she could maintain being married as an independent, strong-willed feminist. Here are some interesting things I learned from cultures in the book. French women reduce the chances of their husbands cheating by pretending to be their mistress. I'm still not sure where I stand with that idea, but it was interesting nonetheless. In Chile, women spend a lot of time nurturing their husbands' egos when really they're the ones in charge. In Denmark, couples work hard to create a cozy home where they can relax and be present in their relationship. In Holland, a work-life balance is super important for their relationship to operate. Lastly, gratitude, especially for the small things, keeps Indian marriages alive. All in all, my takeaways didn't come from any lessons the author gave regarding her own marriage, as so much as what I learned from the culture she encountered. I'm aware that Jo did not spend extensive time in any one location, so the advice given from other cultures may need some more investigating before applying it to your marriage. Number 3. Marriage Be Hard by Kevin and Melissa Fredericks. This New York Times bestseller is the book you've been looking for to give you a comedic look into marriage. You might better know the authors as Kevon Stage and Mrs. Kevon Stage. The couple decided to write this book after growing up in the church and marrying at a young age. Remember when I said the church doesn't talk much about marriage? That's exactly why they felt the need to write this book. These two high school sweethearts have combined interviews from their previous podcast, The Love Hour, plus their almost 2 decades of marriage to discuss how compatibility is overrated, how communication is about way more than talking, how seeing divorce as an option can actually help your marriage, and is there a such thing as healthy jealousy? Throughout the book, Melissa and Kevin each give their perspective about 12 different topics, which is super useful because most times, we only get a one-sided view of the advice given. If you and your spouse are ready to unlayer and get vulnerable with each other to bring the two of you closer, then you need to read Marriage Be Hard as soon as possible. I think one of the most important topics discussed in this book is regarding the topic of sex. Growing up in the church, this topic was taboo. So I'm glad they gave this area the much needed attention that it has been lacking for a very long time. You don't need to be a Christian to enjoy or gain value from this book. However, I think this book is best for couples choosing to be in a monogamous relationship. Number 4. Forgiving What You Can't Forget by Lisa Turquoise. This is another #1 New York Times bestseller on my list. The overarching message to the reader is that you deserve to stop suffering because of what others have done to you. Lisa asked the question, have you ever had a reason to break your life into a before and after? Before a traumatic event and after? Although this book is not just for people that are married, it will certainly help your marriage if you have built up resentment towards your spouse. This book offers teachings from the Bible and provides over 1,000 hours of Lisa's theological study to show you how to move on when the other person refuses to change and never says they're sorry. Walk through a step-by-step process to free yourself from the hurt of your past and feel less offended by it. Discover what the Bible says about forgiveness and the peace that comes from living it out right now. Identify what's stealing trust and vulnerability from your relationships so you can believe there is still good ahead. And lastly, to disempower the triggers hijacking your emotions by embracing the 2 necessary parts of forgiveness. Although this book isn't lengthy, I highly recommend not rushing through this book and keeping a notebook and pen on hand so that you can write out your thoughts and also answer the questions that she poses. I will say that some readers might get triggered by the underlying message of this book, which is that Lisa found forgiveness towards her husband that had an affair but didn't seem remorseful about it initially. With that, please use wisdom with applying everything you read. The author offers some very valuable advice, but she's not a licensed counselor or therapist and has no way of consulting you, the reader, with customized advice. Number 5. Committed by Elizabeth Gilbert. Fun fact, Elizabeth Gilbert and I share the same birthday. Her book, Eat, Pray, Love, is why I booked my first trip to Italy in my early 20s. This book examines the institution of marriage from several historical and modern perspectives, including those of people, particularly women, reluctant to marry. Elizabeth gives research on interracial marriages, marriages during slavery, marriages where the women were the leaders of the home, and so much more. I would say that this book is a continuation of Eat, Pray, Love, but it goes into more details about her relationship with her Brazilian-born Australian citizen lover named Felipe. These two divorcees vowed that they would never get married again under any circumstances after their first failed marriages. After spending many years traveling, Felipe wanted a stable home that required a dresser and not a suitcase. So they settled on living in the US since Elizabeth was thriving as a successful author. One day, after having a layover in Dallas, Felipe is detained and questioned about why he's been visiting America so frequently, and is told that the only way that he could enter the country again is if he married Elizabeth. Otherwise, he would never be allowed to revisit the country. Having to choose between never living with Felipe and building a life together in the US so that she could continue her dreams as an author, or forever living out of a suitcase for them to be together, Elizabeth decided to spend the next 10 months traveling to learn about matrimony. Elizabeth and Felipe wandered across Southeast Asia for 10 months, waiting for the United States government to give Felipe a permit to return to America to be married. If you've been divorced and plan to be remarried, or are already in your second marriage, I recommend reading this book. I do have a spoiler though. Doing research after reading this book, I learned that Elizabeth divorced her second husband, known as Felipe, in the book. What a waste of 9 hours of listening to it on audiobook. Anyway, I believe you can still benefit from the research she gathered on her quest to learn about marriage, and one of the statistics she mentioned in her book is that second marriages have a higher chance of getting a divorce. And I guess she proved that right. This list is by no means exhaustive, but these were books that I read in my first year of marriage, and I thought they were worth passing on to you. If it's one thing I've learned from marriage so far, is that no book can prepare you for 100% of the things you will experience in marriage. But it's wise to have tools in your arsenal to protect it as much as possible. You may be wondering why I'm adding books about marriage on the Wealth Book Club list, and it's because the idea of marriage is to build your own mini kingdom. And if you get a divorce, it almost always destroys the wealth of that kingdom. So the objective is to avoid losing wealth through getting a divorce. So, have you read any of the books on this list? If so, what did you like or dislike about them? Don't forget to leave me a comment. That's all I have for now. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and share this episode with a friend. Until next time, I will talk to you later.